In Venezuela on Friday afternoon, a new flight carrying 183 migrants arrived at the Simón Bolívar International Airport as part of the Back to the Homeland government plan. Chile lifted its tsunami alert following a 7.4 quake that hit the nation's southernmost region. And the Palestinian Authority in Gaza denounced that Israel is using hunger as a weapon of war. Hello and welcome to From the South. I'm Alejandra Garcia from teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. In Venezuela on Friday afternoon, as part of the Back to the Homeland government plan, a new flight carrying 183 migrants arrived at the Simón Bolívar International Airport in Maiquetía, La Guaira. The U.S. flight that took off from the United States landed in Venezuela after a stop in Honduras and was received by the Venezuelan Minister for Interior, Justice and Peace, Diosdado Cabello. Let us recall that earlier on Friday, a flight with 174 nationals on board was similarly received by the minister, who specified that over 3,000 nationals have returned to the country in the last few days as part of the initiative of the Bolivarian government aimed at guaranteeing the safe and dignified return of Venezuelan citizens. Through an official communique, the Venezuelan government categorically rejected a statement issued by the International Court of Justice regarding the provisional measures requested by Guyana against the Venezuelan electoral process for the selection of authorities in the state of Guyana Esequiba. This in the statement, which described the measures as abusive and interventionist, Venezuela reaffirmed that it does not and will never recognize the jurisdiction of the International Court of Justice, nor will it comply with any decision issued by it to settle the territorial dispute over the Guyana Esequiba in a process that has been rigged from the outset and manipulated by anti-Venezuelan corporate interests that have nothing to do with justice. In this sense, the Bolivarian government stressed that this territorial dispute is governed by the 1966 Geneva Agreement, a legally binding instrument that established the obligation of the parties to settle the territorial dispute through a practical and mutually acceptable arrangement. Also adding that nothing in international law allows the International Court of Justice to interfere in matters that are exclusively within the domestic jurisdiction of Venezuela, nor to attempt to prohibit a sovereign act organized within the framework of its participatory political system and based on its constitution and national legislation. The statement goes on to underscore that the Guyana Esequiba is an inalienable part of the Venezuelan territory and a legacy of our liberators. Finally, the Venezuelan government reiterated its demand that the government of Guyana stop delaying direct negotiations and strictly comply with the Geneva Agreement as the sole valid path to a definitive, peaceful and satisfactory settlement for both parties regarding the territory of the Guyana Esequiba. Like every year in Venezuela for International Labor Day, workers across the country went to the streets to denounce the aggressions against their citizens and nation. More on with this correspondent Bruno Falci.
In another demonstration of the popular power of the Bolivarian Revolution, in Caracas, a multitude of people marched to support the government and demand the end of United States economic sanctions against Venezuela.
To all this revolutionary process that day by day has provided us with greater welfare and security in terms of food sovereignty, health, social security in all aspects that we can mention, we are also protesting against the various sanctions and mistreatment that our Venezuelan people have experienced.
The main demand was the release of a 2-year-old baby, Michaelis Espinosa, kidnapped and separated from her family. She is kept hostage by the Trump administration. Her mother was in prison in USA and rescued by the Venezuelan government by one of their repatriation flights. Her father was sent to a prison in El Salvador.
Venezuela is also marching for its population that had to emigrate deceived when we could build a homeland here. And today we are experiencing a totally violent and subhuman situation such as the kidnapping of this baby of our compatriot Maikeli. The situation also of her father and mother whose rights to freedom and to want to return to their homeland were violated. So today we also march for her.
Bukele's government, subject to the interests of Washington, keeps more than 230 Venezuelan citizens in prison without accusation and right to defend themselves. Another reason for the march of the Venezuelan workers in this day, to demand the release of their compatriots.
To soon have in Venezuela and deliver in her arms to her mother this beautiful girl Michaelis Espinosa. And very soon have in Venezuela the 253 Venezuelans kidnapped in the concentration camps of Nayib Bukele. God is watching Nayib Bukele. God is watching you. You know that you have committed one of the most serious errors of human rights violations: forced disappearance and kidnapping. But sooner rather than later there will be justice, and we will have our boys here, free, safe and sound.
The President Nicolas Maduro closed the act, enveloping a crowd that listened to him with maximum attention, with a strong speech showing the harmony of people and their government. He promised to do all the possible efforts to rescue their kidnapped citizens. In the camera of Marcos da Silva, Bruno Falsi, Caracas, Venezuela, for teleSUR.
And now we have a short break coming up, but first remember you can join us on TikTok at teleSUR English, where you'll find news in different formats, news updates and more. We'll be right back, stay with us. Welcome back. In Chile, the National Disaster Prevention and Response Service, SENAPRED, deactivated the tsunami alert for the Magallanes region in the south of the country after a 7.4 magnitude earthquake. The SENAPRED informed the citizenship that they remain in a state of caution and warned them to stay away from the coast and head back to their homes and places of work. The authorities also prohibited activities in beach areas and confirmed there were no fatal victims or structural damage reported so far. They also highlighted the people's civic response and called to closely follow new instructions in the case of possible emergencies. Also in Ecuador, the Citizens' Revolution Retro Coalition denounced an attempt of obstruction on the part of the National Electoral Council upon receiving its appeal to challenge the results of the second round of elections. Our colleague Gabriela Mena with the details.
It is official. In Ecuador, the political coalition Citizens' Revolution Retro challenged the results of the presidential elections held on April 13th. The documentation was delivered on Wednesday, April 30th, around 11 p.m., at which time the coalition publicly denounced that the National Electoral Council was seeking to obstruct the process.
We were here at the door of the National Electoral Council at 11:06 a.m. They opened the door for us. Here at the Secretariat we entered at 11:26 p.m. We asked for a receipt, but they began to count all the tally sheets and they entered us at this time. At the time when they finished counting the tally, when they finish checking them.
Es decir, a las 2:30 de la mañana.
That is at 2:30 a.m. on May 1st. For the coalition, this decision alters the legal procedure, since, in its opinion, the National Electoral Council should have validated the exact time of arrival and not the time at which the tallying of the tally sheets by the electoral personnel ended. On this occasion, 13,917 tally sheets with irregularities were delivered. Furthermore, according to the Citizens' Revolution, a total of 27,834 tally sheets have been delivered so far.
And here we are with all the anomalies and all the obstructions we have had from the National Electoral Council.
La organización también expresó que
The organization also expressed that the National Electoral Council acts as a partial judge in benefit of Daniel Noboa, point with which different organizations, unions, and political analysts agree, who have emphasized that this arbitrariness must be denounced before the Ecuadorian authorities.
The announcements they are making are extremely serious, and this may constitute a critical news. If we had an independent prosecutor's office, which does not act selectively, the prosecutor's office should open an investigation and should carry out the proceedings urgently regarding this, because we must remember that electoral fraud is considered a criminal offense within the Organic Integral Penal Code.
Al momento la revolución no ha descartado.
At the moment, the coalition has not discarded this option. However, for now, it remains expectant to the resolution to be taken by the plenary of the National Electoral Council, which will have to deal with the challenge in 3 days. According to several legislators of the Citizens' Revolution, the only thing they're looking for is that the elections of April 13th be transparent and that the Ecuadorian people be given a voice.
Estas irregularidades no solo afectan a la ciudadanía.
These irregularities not only affect the citizens, but also jeopardize the institutional credibility of the body in charge of guaranteeing the transparent electoral process, affects democracy and the will of millions of Ecuadorians who expect to trust in state institutions, while these bodies act as an appendix of power generating partiality in the electoral process.
Mientras tanto, la alianza se mantiene.
Meanwhile, the coalition remains one step ahead and signed that, in case of receiving a new refusal from the CNE, they will challenge the results before the contentious electoral court, which in a maximum of 15 days should decide whether or not to allow the challenge. The decision taken by the contentious electoral court may not be appealed.
No podrá ser apelada. Gabriela Mena, TeleSUR Ecuador.
On May 3rd, more than 2.75 million voters in Singapore will head to the polls in the country's general elections, where 97 parliamentary seats are being decided. Citizens will choose between 11 political parties and 2 independent candidates who will be elected after 9 days of campaigning. Precisely the election campaign period, which focused on the economic situation and the youth vote, ended at midnight on May 1st. With an economy mostly based on exports, political analysts note that the elections are marked by uncertainty due to the tariff war and highlighted that whoever gets elected will focus its administration on boosting international trade. The Trump administration abrogated the de minimis exemption for goods imports from China. This way, via an executive order, Trump is to set a value equal or less than $800 to all imported merchandise which had been sent without postal network. This measure started to be enforced as of today, May 2nd, which would affect shipments that were previously exempt from duties. Thus, it would benefit paramount e-commerce platforms such as Temu and Chain. Likewise, postal shipments with a value of up to $800 would face a 30% tariff of their worth, or a flat rate of $25 per shipment, which would ramp up to $50 per shipment as of June 1st. And we have a second toll break coming up, but before we invite you to visit our Facebook page at teleSUR English, there you'll be able to watch our top stories, special live coverage and much more. Follow our page and activate the notification button to stay up to date on the world's most recent events. Financial break, we'll be right back. Welcome back. The Palestinian Authority in the Gaza Strip denounced this Friday that the genocidal Israeli regime is using hunger as a weapon of war. The Gaza government press office denounced Israel's blockade and destruction of access to food and medical supplies and other humanitarian supplies destined for the Palestinian people. In this regard, the authority stressed that these actions are a flagrant violation of international humanitarian law and the Geneva Convention. Furthermore, the agency stressed that the Zionist siege causes the death of thousands of civilians, mainly children, and exposes others to the danger of starvation. Thousands of Yemenis marched through at least 36 public squares in the Saada Governorate to show their support for the Palestinian cause and to demand an end to the Israeli aggression in the Gaza Strip. The mobilization started its route in the Square of the Birth of the Prophet, west of the city, and then spread to the Martyr Leaders Square, Shara Square, carrying Palestinian flags and banners expressing their solidarity with the Palestinian people. Demonstrators condemned the Zionist operation carried out against the enclave. These marches taking place as an effort to denounce the worsening humanitarian crisis faced by Gazans due to the Israeli aggression and aid siege. Yemen denounces new airstrikes by the United States against residential areas in the city of Sana'a and the governorate of Al-Jawf. The Yemeni authorities pointed out the bombings were carried out in strategic points in different parts of the city, leaving at least 3 people wounded. They also highlighted that Washington's attacks have intensified during the last few weeks. In this context, the authorities urged international organizations to intervene to stop the aggression against the civilian population in Yemen and Gaza. A ship belonging to the Freedom Flotilla initiative carrying humanitarian aid and activists to Gaza was attacked by a drone in the early hours of Friday in the international waters of Malta. The conscious vessel, which had 12 crew members and 4 activists on board, was approximately 22.5 kilometers east of Malta when it suffered 2 attacks from a drone. The strikes, which appeared to have deliberately targeted the generator, left the crew without power and put the vessel at serious risk of sinking. Activists on board the ship were reportedly on a mission to challenge Israel's illegal siege of Gaza and to deliver aid amid the humanitarian crisis in the Strip. In this context, the Freedom Flotilla International Coalition pointed out to the Zionist regime as the strike's main possible perpetrator. In other news, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his Defense Minister Israel Katz announced Friday that the occupation forces had taken the offensive near the presidential palace in Damascus, capital of Syria. The Israeli forces targeted those who had been their allies in overthrowing the al-Assad government. The Zionist incursion occurred amid clashes between the Druze minority and pro-government fighters. In this context, the Prime Minister said Israel wouldn't allow the sending of forces to the south of Damascus or another threat to the Druze community. This in the context of an internal conflict between different ethnic groups and factions in Syria, triggered by the coup d'etat staged by terrorist forces now in power. In this context, the Syrian government denounced the Israeli attacks against the presidential palace, considering it an escalation against the country's institutions. The presidency pointed out that the attacks reflect Israel's desire to destabilize the nation and aggravate the security crisis faced by the people. In this sense, it called on the international community and the Arab countries to support Damascus in the face of the aggressions that violate international laws and conventions. And the Vatican enters the countdown to the election of Pope Francis' successor with an extensive technological deployment to shield the security of the upcoming conclave. This way, the smokestack has already been installed, and the Vatican has informed on the implementation of a full digital blackout to prevent any attempt at electronic espionage. The initiative was explained by the director of the Vatican press room, who stated that in the digital era, extreme measures must be taken to guarantee the secrecy of the conclave, an inviolable demand for the process since the 13th century. Out of the 190 cardinals who took part in the days of reflection after the pontiff's passing, 100 will hold the responsibility of electing the new pope. And like this, we have come to the end of this News Brief, but you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also join us on social media. We are on Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok as well. For TeleSUR English, I'm Alejandra Garcia. Thank you for watching.